Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphan Last, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm going to continue right where I left off, critiquing the comic book artwork within Monster MD. These two last panels, I'm fairly confident. Let me just copy and paste that layer. Let me go ahead and just select this panel here, copy and paste it, and just bring it down, lower its opacity. So, in this panel, he's got the cigarette, his arm is up, and the smoke is right here. In this panel, down below, the invisible woman has a cigarette, her lungs are showing, and the smoke is up here. But once, you can tell that it's pretty much the exact same drawing, except, omit his arm and the smoke there, and just add, the lungs, the smoke, the cigarette. Really nice workflow, I think. It works really well. It's not a zoom in, it's not a zoom out, or anything like that. Alright, so, of the panels that are just a straight up black border all the way around it, this one is the best executed so far, I feel. Like when I scroll up through here, like I like this one, but the black border is broken up around this region up here, in that region right there. This one right here, like it's fine, it's passably good, but it's just something about it just doesn't seem to grab me quite very well. But then again, it doesn't really have to. Not that panel. Nothing's really significant happening there. But in terms of just what's going on here, this one grabs me a lot, and some of it is the camera angle that's going on in this last panel right here. And I'll get into talking about that in just a sec. So this panel right here, it is... Let me take a look at something real quick. Let me grab something out of here, copy it, and see if I can just paste it here. Okay, cool. Okay, that worked. Okay, let me lower the opacity of it and blow it up. Okay, actually this looks like a panel that is inspired by these panels up here, but it kind of a zoom in sort of thing, but it's a completely new drawing. This is a completely new drawing. It's not like a hybrid of these two panels up here. It's not a hybrid of these two. And that's fine, that's cool. And this is kind of interesting. How do you show somebody high-fiving the invisible woman? How do you do that? Notice all that there is in the background, just a bunch of silhouettes right here of trees, and then over here you get a little silhouette of a different kind of tree. And alright, so this panel, we're looking up at him as he's looking down at his arm. See a little bite marks going on right there. Pretty cool. So this right here, this last panel right here, okay? So if I follow this out, and I maybe follow this one out, okay, so the horizon line would be something like right here. So we're looking up at the scene. It creates a dynamic sort of look. And not including the horizon line in the canvas kind of gives us an interesting point of view of the scene. Now the horizon is not necessarily the literal horizon, okay? It's important people understand that. It oftentimes is, but it's not always the horizon. Okay, again, all throughout this entire page, there is only the hint of a background going on with just silhouettes of a tree. I'd wagered a bet to say that this artist has probably drawn out a bunch of silhouettes of trees and saved them as a brush pack, and just kind of quickly uses them in order to go through a bunch of different sorts of work. Alright, so let's copy this panel, and I'd wager a bet to say that, okay, so it looks like, okay, so the silhouettes of the trees are the same, but everything else, like it's the exact same background, or implied background. But the positioning of the lenses, they've changed from panel to panel. Characters' body languages have changed between panels. That's interesting. So we have notice this, okay? So we have a close-up right there. We kind of have a bit of a wide shot of things going on. Shows three characters all in one panel. And then we have a bit of a close-up sort of thing going on. It is kind of weird to see this guy on this side, and then all of a sudden he's over here. That is weird. it confuses me a little bit. Like, the invisible woman is, like, she's invisible, so it's not like there could be any more than 2 visible characters in the scene, so it's not that confusing, but it just kind of feels like, it just feels like this should have been the camera angle, but yet it's not. Let me clarify. The reason why this panel confuses me is because it kind of feels like they broke the 180 rule. If you don't know what the 180 rule is, then you need to study a little bit about photography, film, such like that. Okay, so it can't be a camera movement where the camera swings from here to here and then swings right back. That would be really weird. It's got to cut to this. I guess in a way, this gives a little bit of an emphasis on what's going on. Alright, so this is a very proper looking background, which is kind of interesting because, you know, it's just kind of a lot of round shapes, curvy looking things, and you can tell that, you know, this panel was copied and such like that, and the only thing that really changed from one panel to the other was this guy. Really, all that really happened was this arm was removed, and then he was selected, and then scaled down, placed further up. The body language changed. That's all that's changed between this panel and this panel here, okay? Which is cool. I like this little touch right here, Red Rum. A lot of horror movie and a lot of horror, I guess, Easter eggs throughout the entire thing here. Okay, so a panel where he's giving her his dress, his medical coat. It's communicated well. I am interested how this artist would draw a house that's on fire. That's something that I'm interested in because, like, that right there, it doesn't really effectively communicate fire to me. It's fine, but it's interesting. Let's back out. Okay, so once again, we have a panel that is all negative space, but the negative space kind of consumes the entire thing, even though they are in a brightly lit scene in this panel, this panel, this panel, and this panel, okay? Which gives you an emotional sort of experience. Okay, and yes, based off of what's in the text bubble here, I do know that he says something that is on his mind that's really affecting him. Like, you can actually see, like, he's acting. His facial expression looking kind of dull. It's intentional. His frustration here and all that. It's all intentional. The character is acting, and it all makes sense. The negative space transitioning emotions here makes sense. All of it does. I like the rendering of the smoke here. This was done well. This is my favorite thing, my favorite image of smoke inside of this whole comic book so far. I think it's funny how, like, the ear here, how it looks. It's like, it's kind of like the ear is like that, and then there's like some sort of bone that goes right through here. It's weird, and then there's like some gaping hole here. The anatomy that's thrown here. It's not accurate, but it's interesting to look at. I like it. It's cool. Now this is cool. This is interesting. Okay, now once again, another panel. Like, this is kind of like having so much negative space just like this from page to page kind of gives unity to the design. If you think about it as a graphic designer, it creates unity in the design of the comic book. But this is kind of cool because really all that's really drawn are a few little weird floating spindles, a little cone and a circle, and then, you know, kind of the hint of another one, and a bunch of motion lines and zappy thing and fzzzt going on through here. And yet the way it was colored was executed extremely well, communicating excitement and stuff like that. I really like that. That looks cool. And down here on panel 2, there's no hint of a background except for maybe a few little gusts of something in the wind here. Yeah, nothing really to talk about except for I really like how the artist drew out these glasses from a good variety of different angles and yet was able to keep it looking right with such a loose form of perspective. How do you communicate the Invisible Woman running, which is kind of interesting. And evidently she threw it off and she's running around naked right here. That's interesting. Notice how the rendering here isn't really the best, but then again, it doesn't really need to be, because like there's so much interesting things going on here, so much interesting stuff going on here, and so much interesting stuff going on here, that not everything always has to be rendered with an amazing quality. This panel and this panel right here, it's the exact same background, even the exact same pose of him, except now he has, the medical coat over his head inside of this panel here, and the glasses are in a different position. And that's it. That's the only differences between the two panels there. Now, what's kind of cool about this image is there is no background inside of here. All there is just this use of negative space that's coming up from above, and just negative space that just was decided to be used right there. It's not even really a panel. Well, I guess it is a panel, except that the car is coming out of it. The van is coming out of it, rather. And this would qualify, I think, as the capital panel. Like, in terms of comic book panel layout, this is all pretty straightforward. Where, you just got two widescreen, wide shot sort of images, and then two really quick beats going on right there down below. And then you have a capital where your eye's going to rest for a little while longer. You got music going on here. Like, that's kind of an interesting way of communicating music. And right about this time when I was getting rid of the text on the screen, if you notice really carefully, the letterer actually, it's not just a perfect oval. He actually kind of let each speech bubble kind of submit to gravity a little bit in some way, except for this one, which is kind of weird. It's like the text bubble is like a bouncing ball. Kind of. I don't know if he thinks about it that way. I haven't even talked to the letterer, but it is interesting. I really like the perspective on the vehicle. It is weird that, this front portion is curved like that, and then it's curved the opposite direction here. I kind of want to go up a little bit and look at a different version of the car, or the van, rather. But I guess this is the first time we get to see the front of the vehicle, and it's got around the radiator, it's got a smiley face with sharp teeth, which is an interesting touch. It's got a little ghost on the side as a bumper sticker, and they can't have AC/DC, but they can have ADHD. That's that's awesome. ADHD. I like it. The image, even though, they got these lines going on here, what's interesting here is that the Dutch angle, there's a Dutch angle going on here like that. The vanishing point would be, wow, that's really curved. Yeah. So, like, this artist, he uses these curved lines, and, but yet it doesn't drift off into sloppiness. So I guess that's how he's doing it. Like, this would be, like, I would assume this is 1-point perspective, to be honest. But I don't know, the perspective is used so loosely, but it's constructing such a detailed image that it's got me puzzled to some extent. It's interesting. I guess you don't need to be super meticulous with your perspective if all you have is one subject, one thing being drawn. Okay? And so this is a panel that I've been looking forward to getting to, but first let me get into this. Alright, so we have another panel. We have all of this negative space. We have some of the foreground of the ground that's kind of blending into the negative space. The negative space on this first panel, it's interesting because, like, outside of the panel, you got the van, you got the Invisible Woman, and you got the church, okay, exceeding outside of the panel. And of course, for all we know, this tree could be exceeding outside of the panel, but, it's not, because it's black. I've been looking forward to this panel right here, because Okay, okay, that's interesting. One second here, let's... Okay, so the horizon line is something like right here. It looks like it's 1 point perspective, but it doesn't... I don't know, it could pass as 2 point perspective because he kind of drew these lines as slanted here, but maybe it's just that his vanishing point is so far away that, you know, everything starts to kind of level out quite a bit, which can happen. This ellipse was just 100% free-handed, it looks like, and then these other ellipses were just quickly free-handed as well, which is just these curved lines, these super cartoony crosses. You know, this is all admiration. It's not a criticism of it. I've been looking forward to looking at this panel and talking about it. You know, other than, you know, the silhouette of the ground here, I guess they have dirt piles, dirt mounds, and maybe these are bones? I'm not really quite sure. No, it can't be bones. This is like it's got to be like a broken fence. That's what these little things have to be. There's a little mound of grass and another cross here, silhouettes of trees, and then just one building, and you have your whole background. And I guess for the foreground you have that and two characters. Not the hardest thing to do. Oh yeah, and a few little gusts of leaves, and then some of the negative space was actually erased in order to keep some of the leaves floating around in the gust of wind, exceeding outside of the panel. That's an interesting touch. That's something really subtle that most people won't ever notice. Okay, so this panel right here. Okay, I guess, you know, the wind is interesting right there. The expression on his face is kind of interesting. Not really much of anything to write home about. Nothing in the background. All of that's just the color artist playing around with stuff. I really like that. That's dramatic. I guess this is the Invisible Woman's point of view being used. Okay, that's weird. Oh, okay. So what we're looking at is unfortunate. This right here is the door, which is covered up actually on panel 1 of this page. It's right here. You can see a little bit of it, but sometimes it's hard to know where to put a text bubble. Even Greg Capullo mentions how it's unfortunate that sometimes it's necessary to have a text bubble or some sort of narration box covering up something that actually looks kind of cool or helps tell the story even a little bit. But this is all fine. This is cool. Because once I reached this panel, I was thinking, wait, aren't all the doors to the church just barred? You know, because there's all these bars going on right through here. I guess he's trying to look through the window. I really like the exaggerated eye right there. I think that looks awesome. Now, I don't think that motion blurs are necessary for this panel at all, but it does make me kind of curious, so I'm going to play around with that. I don't know, you tell me. Do you think that looks good? This is with motion blur, this is with it gone. Of course, I'm doing it kind of sloppy, but it's just something to kind of think about. Okay, so this kind of changes it up a little bit. So the negative space is still present all throughout here. Okay, but it is kind of present up here and in this little spot here. His expression there. I love the expressiveness of the foreshortening going on here. And, you know, it looks like he's gaining ground, but, you know, this thing is pretty stinking elastic. So we have something big to look at here. And then we have something kind of, you know, there's a lot to look at inside of this panel here. But it's something small, and then something even smaller to look at. And the smaller it is, the less time it has on screen, it feels like. The rendering of him isn't really that detailed, doesn't really need to be, but I like the rendering of the clay that's going on through here. as it gets hit by this harpoon with the syringe. I like that. You can even see little bits of the clay that have scattered out pretty far away. You can see little bits of shrapnel that's kind of coming out. It actually does look like some motion blur was used there. I'm not quite sure if that's the case. Maybe it's just the image quality of these images. Maybe the image quality has been reduced, and that's what makes it feel like that. I really like the ellipses used for the bandages to communicate the invisible woman. It's really cool. Really well done. Not a single background is drawn on this entire page. I like the rendering of the machinery here. That's really well done. Okay, so this seems to be like kind of a signature of this artist, with negative space at the top, negative space at the bottom, some sort of capital image in the middle. I like that. I think that's interesting. Interesting composition. So like we are in the armpit, or really close to the armpit of this monster. You know, you see its mouth, its teeth, and then you get to see a cool action pose from the main character. But the rendering isn't really anything to really write home about right on that page. But this page is awesome. Like you see the harpoon going like that. You see all these clay bits that are just kind of scattering about and wrapping around his arm. His expression is awesome. Kind of cool that this clay up here and his arm right here are both kind of going the same angle. What's interesting, what I like here, is how this harpoon, you can actually see the harpoon going on right here. I really like this panel, really do. So the camera doesn't do any sort of movement through here. He's pretty much stuck right there, and I think he probably did copy this panel right here and moved it down here, but only to use it as an onion skin sort of thing that you would normally use for animation, drawing keyframes, because there's not any, like, other than storytelling. His arm is inside of this creature here made out of clay. There's no similarities between these two panels here. So yeah, I think these were, I guess, a term I could say is keyframed. Okay, this is cool. So he's got negative space here, but these aren't, like, I guess this accentuates just how desperate the main character is feeling, because like these are not perfectly square. They're starting to slant, starting to be more expressive, which is kind of cool. I really like the rendering of the clay monster here. Really nice color work too. Okay, this is something that kind of sticks out to me. Like, look at that syringe. Like, then there's this curvature to it. I don't know, I really like how this artist does that. And it's not like there's smoke or anything here, but, you know, having these circular wisps around it really makes this look good. I like this panel, and yet there's not much in it. I mean, there's a little bit of machinery here, but it's not really that detailed. There's, you know, this explosion going on, and then there's a lot of, you know, cord going around, and then there's the wisps that are kind of going around it, and then there's the invisible woman, and then the syringe. And this is another one of those panels that's kind of like when we saw the front of the van for the very first time. You know, it's got this going on here. Kind of cool. And some of the use of the negative space gives you an excuse to sometimes break out of the panel. I like that. I like that a lot. Kind of want to play with this panel a little bit. Okay, this time around I've really tried to reduce the amount of motion blur, but like maybe let's try, like, you can always erase some of it if it doesn't look good, but like I've tried to kind of tone it down a bit, just a touch. I don't know, I think too much of it can really distract, but like at least with my take on this panel, I like it here, I like it here, I like it here on the rope, and I like some of it that's going on here with the arm. I like it on here. At least this is my critique of my modification of it. I don't know, your thoughts? I think, like, here's the original, which is good. It's good. Don't get me wrong, but I like that too. It just has a little bit more going on with it, I feel, when it has the motion blur. So this is it without. It's great. This is it with. Just adds a little bit of motion to it. Okay, so we have an upward sort of view of the scene here on panel 3. Not really much to talk about with this panel. I guess he has... Okay, so he's got these curved lines that are kind of going like that. That's cool. So, you know, the horizon line would be up here. Or at least this is the... This would be the zenith. The third vanishing point, 3-point perspective for those of you that are more attuned to using linear perspective. I'm pretty sure he just drew a couple of lines towards the vanishing point rather quick, simple, and easy, and then, you know, he just kind of, I don't know, drew it out really quick. I mean, I maybe had a perspective grid and probably didn't even need to do that. He just quickly drew out this background. So far, okay, so there's two panels with backgrounds inside of this comic book page. Okay, so once again, they're outside of the church. I love these weird curvatures that he just kind of throws in here. It adds so much interesting appeal to the image. And this is one of my favorite panels, and it's a capital panel. At least it's a term that I created, but that's what I call it. Okay, so his hair kind of breaks out of the panel, and it's just one panel, and yet he appears here. And, you know, to add a little bit of drama to the scene, you know, he appears as a silhouette, and there's these little negative space, little white dots that are appearing throughout here, like little bits of dirt flying through the air into the building. His eyes are white to kind of show a little bit of amazement going on. Really dramatic. And then in the same panel, having him in these two places kind of communicates that maybe he's going down a flight of stairs, maybe, or just generally that he's walked from here to here with this expression, the white eyes. Just, yeah, that one makes more sense, where he's just wide-eyed and kind of looks almost like a look of fear on his face. I really like how the colorist really touched this up here. Really looks nice. And once again, you know, this is a black panel, like a negative space panel, and the negative space that's being used all the way up here is being used to create him in silhouette. In your brain, it plays a story, and I've seen this done by a lot of comic book artists. It plays out really well for the person reading the book. I really like the rendering of this guy right here. It looks awesome. I think maybe a little bit of motion blur would have looked good for maybe a few little tiny bits of him floating through the air. Other than that, I like it. I'm pretty sure they grabbed this face, enlarged it, and placed it right here, and just kind of used it as the base to add more detail onto him. And it's a panel that's not perfectly square, going like that. Then another panel here, then a large horizontal panel, 2 beats. Okay, so I tend to call these smaller panels beats. It's the same. Like this one takes you a little bit more time to look at because it's slightly larger. It's kind of like the soundtrack, the beat of a drum. Okay. The pace of how you're going to be reading the comic book. Like, you see a larger panel with a lot of really cool rendering going on with it, a lot of motion going on in the image, and it gets you to look at that panel a little bit longer. And same thing here with this. You know, you got 3 characters inside of the panel, and then which gives you a lot more real estate to add text. Okay, and then once again, using negative space to tell the story all throughout here. And then it's like a grunge brush was used on the little highlight here to add these little bits of grit and stuff through here, which helps communicate a bit of story of shock. Like there's light radiating from him to some extent, and he's in shock. You can kind of see it on his expression going on here. Now, once again, to kind of illustrate the gravity of something being a little bit more dramatic, you know, the text bubble is like this, and then, you know, the border around the text is white, just like the actual text bubble itself. Which kind of gets the text bubble to look like it's wrapping around the text, and it gives you the sensation of something creepy, something with gravity is being said. Okay, with all the other text bubbles inside of the comic book, I've turned them to white. But in this case, you know, I wanted to have this. Okay, so it says Gabriel, Angel of Death in Blood. Okay, that's creepy as hell. So there's a hole in the ceiling, little bits of garbage, looks like rebar, and a little bit of rubble still clinging onto it. I don't know what's going on with this brick here. Why a brick would still be falling from the roof kind of confuses me. It almost got me to think that maybe this statue came crashing down, just decided to randomly just, you know, fall like that the first time I looked at it towards us. That's kind of what I thought, but I don't think that's what's happened. I mean, I think that this has been here inside of the church all along. It's just this is the first time that he noticed it. Why is there shrapnel that big still falling from the roof? I mean, it's dramatic, but some of it is kind of confusing the storytelling, I feel. I mean, it's fine to have these little dust particles and stuff like that going on through here. I think that's awesome. That looks great. But yeah, this brick, the little bits of stuff here, they don't make sense to me in terms of the storytelling. Because like I said, I get the impression that this thing just fell through the roof. Or maybe something that we never got to see maybe jumped off of this statue of Gabriel and through the roof. But yet nothing here tells us that happened. So, like, I don't know. This is just, maybe this is me nitpicking it, but this is what I feel whenever I see all this shrapnel going on, still falling from the roof. I think his pose is perfect for being a look of surprise. Having this be, you know, where there's a vanishing point up here, it may very well be a one-point perspective, but I don't think perspective was really used very strongly for this piece. But I think it came out really well. I like this panel. It's awesome. The use of negative space up here, and then all the way through here, even in this panel, is really cool. And then, you know, you have a close-up on Gabriel right here. Now, I guess this statue is maybe alive? I'm not really quite sure. And, you know, again, we get a panel that's not quite perfectly square here. And, you know, we got light, and then we have it being chipped away by a grungy brush right here, which gives you the same feeling that's generated on this panel right here. So you get the sensation that he is freaking the hell out, which is great. That's exactly what they were going for. They added these motion lines, like he's kind of quivering in fear, like trauma has just been settling in. You got this, you know, little bits of perspiration going on. I like the eyes. I love what the colorist did with the eyes, and then the final panel of this page right here. It's pretty straightforward. You know, you get a little hint of the church out here, but there's not really much perspective. You know, you get more of an impression of perspective going on here than actually having anything formally drawn out as perspective. And again, it's kind of just 1 point perspective right there again. So far, 3-point perspective hasn't really been used that much. Okay, so this panel right here is awesome. In that this is the image, like right here. This is the image that was used up here. Okay, all right. So now I get to critique this finally. Okay, so I love the trees. I love the rendering of them. Yellow is actually a good color for this. I love the rendering of these trees. And they're so simplistically drawn too. It's just a few little lines kind of drawn out in just a really quick, organic sort of way. And yeah, I like it a lot. And then it's just, rocks are easy to draw. You just and then the colorist went ahead and really boosted up this rock quite a bit. You can see how the colorist just added a few little details and made it look so much better. And then you have just a few more rocks, a few little impressions of there being little bushes, a few bushes in between rocks, and the trees, and then you have a background. The colorist added in little bits of dimension into the ground, which turned out looking pretty good. It makes it look like there was more stuff done there artistically within this space than there really was. And then there's just a few mounds kind of drawn out really quick, I think. A few little dots, a little rock drawn out there, and a few little impressions of a bush. What's interesting is that the way that this was illustrated, the colorist had to make a decision that's interesting. So, like, there's a little bit of a bush, kind of implied that there's a little bit of grass or bush here, and then he kind of drew out this, like that, like so, and then he drew out some lines here. And then the colorist, within this region right here, they just kind of ended it and used a series. The greenery here is grayer than it is anywhere else in the composition, and so the gray makes it so that the gray nature of the ground kind of mends into the greenery really well without the need of having any line work to show, okay, that's the edge of the grass there. Shades of gray, desaturating, like I can make this purple look like it totally fits here as well, as long as it's desaturated enough, which is desaturated meaning a form of gray, maybe a little bit darker and a little bit more desaturated. So yeah, like I could make purple seem like it fits there to some extent. See that this is purple right there. In fact, yeah, I bet you this is purple right there. Well, it's blue, but I'm sure purple is somewhere in here. Yeah, purple is in here. Using the eyedropper, I can see purple. So, see, it fits right there, which is kind of cool. Like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if the artist has a brush pack full of silhouettes of trees. And I'm pretty sure that he probably planted in a bunch of silhouettes of trees, and then he just went ahead and used that as a template to quickly draw out these trees. And like within a short period of time, you can actually render an image pretty quickly. I mean, like you got rocks, you got greenery. I mean, you got rocks, which are easy to draw. You got greenery here. You got trees, and you kind of imply a little bit within this region right here ish, and right here. That there's a horizon, and the horizon is kind of bent. It's kind of round, which is kind of cool. And you got yourself a background. You got yourself an environment that looks and feels as if it's real. And you put the car in here, and if we follow this out, these lines, okay, so looks like the vanishing point might be right there, and looks like it was used on the door, the front here, like perspective was used here, maybe a little bit on this harpoon gun, but everything else is a front face, which might be 2-point perspective. I kind of doubt it. I think it was mainly just 1-point perspective-ish. If it is 2-point perspective, then once again the vanishing point is a ways off the page. But it's not that hard to draw. 2-point perspective is no harder than 1-point perspective in that as long as you have a perspective grid, you can freehand it really easy. I really like this image. I guess I kind of like these glyphs that are drawn out on the box here. This comic book kind of reminds me of Constantine and Supernatural, and you know, it's got its own take on it. It's and these glyphs right here remind me of those angelic glyphs that ward off angels, because angels in Supernatural are bad, back when, you know, Supernatural was still kind of cool. You know, I guess this medical symbol is different because, you know, there's a star in the middle of the staff there. I don't think that's in the regular medical symbol. This is pretty cool here. Like his eyes are shrouded in gray, in black, which merges in with all the negative space, which again keeps the emotional, dramatized aspect of the story going on. I kind of get the impression that they're in the same place as they were a few pages ago because of this thing, but you know, there's a lake here where there wasn't a lake last time, so that kind of confuses me a little bit. You would think that this would just be like two rocks kind of sitting next to each other or something, but whatever. It is what it is. Once again, you just like, I kind of get the impression that he just drew out a straight line right here and then possibly drew out like a few squigglies, maybe. No, unless he used a colored line to tell the colorist this is water. Most of that's done. This water is done with by the colorist, 100%. And then once again, there's just a bunch of silhouettes of trees, a few little imprints of dirt, a few little rocks, this little, you know, rock that's squarish that they're sitting on, and two people, and that's it. Real quick, real easy. Okay, so the use of negative space here, that's all going on through here, is really cool because, like, now he's, like, to help dramatize what he's going through, you know, he's got, it's like the artist just pulled out an eraser, and it's like if this green was the negative space, okay, it's like he pulled out the eraser and he just kind of went ahead and drew out in negative space the trees, or maybe he drew the trees initially. I don't know. Maybe the colorist is the one that's been making the negative space black. I'm not sure. But either way, I get the impression that the trees were either erased or they were drawn, and then you know, the desire for the negative space to be black came in, and so they made a selection around each and every single branch and maybe deleted it. But I'm kind of tempted to say it was just erased. Like the trees, instead of them being black like they always are in every other panel, except for, you know, when they're actually rendered, they're in negative. They're a different type of negative. They're the bright silhouette of the image, but it's colored. You know, there's green going on through here, and then a little bit of red here, and then it's kind of fading to a brownish color, I think. And you know, it looks like he's looking at his arm here and thinking about how he got his Frankenstein arm, and the rendering on it is great. The amount of black in the composition makes it perfect for light, which is awesome. I like this. I like how that's been rendered. And I guess that's it. So if you guys want to get a copy of Monster MD, I don't know if it's out, to be honest. I think it's still inside of an Indiegogo process. But if you want to get a hold of the guy that knows everything, this is his Twitter, and you can find it right here, at _ I guess, rise again _ I guess. This is the author, and you know, he seems to promote it quite a bit, and I've been supportive of it. I've retweeted a number of his tweets and really enjoyed my interaction with him. So I'm glad I've been able to give it a little bit of exposure inside of one of my videos finally. So if you've liked this video, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to get more notifications from me, or to have more participation with my community, feel free to follow me on Twitter, or go ahead and join my Discord server. A link to both is in the video description below. If you'd like to support this channel, feel free to click on the image of my mascot in the upper right corner of the screen. It leads to my Patreon. And if you've enjoyed this content and would like to see more, feel free to click on anything else that's appearing on the screen right now. Thank you very much for your time.